They brought joy to American households like few others ever had. Jackie Gleason thundered onto the screen as the brash and boisterous Ralph. Audrey Meadows countered with sharp wit and charm as his clever and unflappable wife, Alice. And then there was Art Carney, whose portrayal of the offbeat, lovable Ed Norton made him a scene-stealing sensation. Together, they created TV magic in the Honeymooners. Fans adored them and assumed their off-screen relationships mirrored the warmth and camaraderie they displayed on television. But once the Honeymooners wrapped, something unexpected happened. Art Carney vanished from the public dynamic. No interviews, no celebratory reunions, no shared memories. And most baffling of all, he never spoke to Audrey Meadows again. Not once. For decades, the reason for his silence remained a mystery. Until now. When the Honeymooners debuted in 1955, it quickly captured the hearts of audiences and skyrocketed into the pantheon of classic television. Though the series ran for only 39 episodes, it left an indelible mark on the sitcom genre. Week after week, viewers tuned in to witness the lives of working-class Brooklynites. The dream-filled bus driver Ralph Cramden and his razor-sharp wife Alice, who anchored his wild schemes with unshakable resolve. Their fiery, boisterous arguments were always grounded in deep affection. And then there was Ed Norton, Ralph's eccentric but good-natured upstairs neighbor and best friend, brought to life by Art Carney. With just a glance or an odd gesture, Carney would have audiences in stitches. His quirky delivery and physical comedy became the heart of the show's humor. His performance earned him an Emmy and instant national recognition. The dynamic among Gleason, Meadows, and Carney seemed effortless. Audiences imagined the trio as just as close off-screen as they appeared on screen. But that illusion masked a much different reality. Away from the cameras, their relationships were not as warm or intimate as fans might have believed. Jackie Gleason was known for his larger-than-life personality, brilliant but mercurial. Audrey Meadows was articulate, strong, and always well-prepared. Art Carney, by contrast, was reserved and kept to himself. He came to work, performed flawlessly, and left immediately after shooting. According to those who worked on the set, Carney was always courteous and professional but emotionally distant. He didn't socialize. He didn't mingle. He wasn't interested in building close relationships with his co-stars. And when opportunities for cast reunions and retrospectives surfaced years later, Carney was conspicuously absent. Interviews with Meadows often included fond reflections on the show and her castmates, especially Jackie. But Carney rarely reciprocated those sentiments publicly. When he mentioned the Honeymooners, it was almost always about Gleason. Audrey's name rarely came up. Then came a moment that confirmed suspicions of a deeper disconnect. When Audrey Meadows passed away in 1996, fans expected Art Carney to release a statement or offer a tribute to his former co-star. But he remained silent. Not a word. No condolence. No public memory shared. For many longtime viewers, it felt like an emotional snub. Others chalked it up to Carney's well-known reclusiveness. But those who had been paying closer attention wondered, what was the real reason behind his silence? Could there have been tension brewing all along? Though never made public during the show's run, some reports suggest that the atmosphere on set was more tense and complex than fans knew. Both Meadows and Carney were consummate professionals. Neither caused disruptions, neither sought drama. But professionalism doesn't necessarily equate to camaraderie. Behind the scenes, Gleason maintained tight creative control. He disliked rehearsing, frequently changed scripts on a whim, and expected everyone to adjust instantly. Audrey Meadows, with her live TV background, was adaptable and could pivot quickly with Gleason's last-minute decisions. Carney, however, struggled with the unpredictable nature of the environment. Privately, he battled anxiety and a dependence on alcohol, issues that were never made public at the time. He never missed a performance, but the backstage experience was far from easy for him. This stress likely impacted how he related to his colleagues. Some have claimed that Meadows' impeccable timing and commanding presence in rehearsals occasionally left Carney feeling overshadowed. Others believe Gleason, who thrived on creative dominance, intentionally kept the cast emotionally compartmentalized to retain control. Additionally, Meadows was outspoken and reflective in interviews, eager to share her memories of the show and her fellow actors. Carney, on the other hand, gave few interviews and was cautious when he did. He kept his answers brief, focused on the work, and avoided emotional commentary. This reserved approach created a wall that even someone as warm and expressive as Meadows couldn't break through. When the honeymooners wrapped, Carney didn't linger. There were no farewell parties, no emotional goodbyes, and no promises to stay in touch. He simply stepped away, quietly and permanently. Over time, his absence from everything Honeymooners related became more pronounced. While Jackie Gleason returned to television with variety programs, and Meadows continued working in film and television, Carney retreated from the spotlight. He didn't disappear entirely. His career continued. In fact, he stunned critics and audiences alike by winning an Oscar in 1975 for Harry and Tonto, proving his range as a dramatic actor. Yet, despite this accolade, he never re-engaged with the world of the Honeymooners. Reunion specials, anniversary tributes, behind-the-scenes documentaries. Carney declined them all. Invitations were extended. He politely refused. Requests for comment or contribution to retrospectives were met with silence. As other cast members reflected on their shared experience, Carney remained the lone, silent outlier. The people, the memories, the friendships, he left them all behind. Carney's absence was deeply felt. Even Jackie Gleason, known for his large personality and complicated nature, spoke with genuine admiration about Carney in interviews. He labeled him a genius, a partner, and credited Carney's impeccable comedic instincts as essential to the show's success. Audrey Meadows also lauded his sense of timing and understated brilliance. Yet despite the praise, Art Carney remained silent. Ever polite, never unkind, but persistently quiet. Why? Some suggest that Carney was never comfortable with the fame that the Honeymooners brought him. Stardom had never been his goal. At the height of his popularity, Carney was reportedly suffering from severe anxiety and depression, conditions only made worse by public attention. He once confessed that the fame unsettled him, and he found comfort in anonymity. That discomfort may have driven him to detach from the very show that made him a household name. But then, there's Audrey. Her connection to this mystery is where things grow even more perplexing. According to a former producer on the Jackie Gleason show, Carney and Meadows ceased communication entirely after the series concluded. There were no public tributes exchanged, no appearances at shared events, and notably, they both refused to take part in retrospective specials, always turning them down separately, never as a pair. When Audrey Meadows passed away in 1996, fans anticipated at least a brief comment from her former co-star. But Carney, alive and well at the time, remained completely silent. No public condolences, no statements, not even a whispered word to the press. Was it sorrow, remorse, or had the distance grown so wide that any acknowledgement would have rung hollow? To this day, no one can say for sure. Just when it seemed the mystery couldn't deepen further, an old interview with Audrey Meadows began making the rounds. An interview that might hold the key to understanding everything. While Carney remained tight-lipped, Audrey occasionally reflected on those years, particularly later in life. In her 1994 memoir, Love, Alice, released just 2 years before her death, she reminisced about the Honeymooners, describing Jackie Gleason's intensity and the chaotic nature of live television. But her references to Art Carney were few and notably restrained. She called him brilliant and gentle, but never elaborated on any close bond. In a lesser-known interview from the early 1990s, when pressed about her relationship with Carney post-show, she paused, looked away, and gave a carefully measured response. "We worked well together," she said, "but we were different people. I don't think Art was ever truly comfortable around anyone, not even himself." That quiet observation struck many as an indirect allusion to Carney's lifelong struggles with anxiety, alcohol, and emotional detachment. It wasn't said with malice, it was introspective. This was a woman who had shared years with him on stage and under bright lights, yet had never truly gotten to know him. Even Gleason, who clashed with just about everyone at some point, apparently stayed in closer contact with Meadows than Carney ever did. And that disconnect wasn't lost on Audrey. In another radio appearance, she admitted to sometimes wondering whether Carney felt misunderstood. Not by the audience, but by those who worked beside him. "There was always a sadness in his eyes," she said. "A sort of yearning. But he never let anyone get close enough to ask why." People often assume that casts from iconic shows become off-screen families. But the Honeymooners wasn't built that way. There was mutual admiration and professional warmth, yes, but also noticeable distance, and Carney appeared to prefer it that way. According to Meadows, rehearsals were orderly, respectful, but not intimate. "We clocked in, we clocked out," she once said. The magic happened on camera, but off-set, things were very quiet. She also revealed, albeit subtly, that she and Carney never reconnected after the show ended. Not even when Gleason died in 1987. Not when the show entered the Television Hall of Fame. Not even when fans rallied for a reunion special. When asked whether she had ever considered reaching out, Meadows replied, "I thought about it many times." But Carney had long since moved on from that chapter of his life. And the saddest part? She seemed to have accepted that. "You have to understand," she told the interviewer. "Art was an extremely private man. He needed his space. And I don't think he knew how to revisit the past without reopening old wounds." Wounds from what? That's the question that's lingered for decades, one that even those closest to the show never managed to answer. But there is one piece of the puzzle that may offer some insight. It involves a breakdown, very public in hindsight, and a name that Carney never once spoke in connection to it. In 1961, just a few years after the Honeymooners ended, Art Carney experienced what his family later referred to as an emotional collapse. At the time, the public simply believed he was taking a break. But privately, Carney had entered a dark period, wrestling with depression, anxiety, and a growing dependence on alcohol that had been quietly building for years. His bright, comedic energy on television was a sharp contrast to the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. Some speculated that the pressures of live TV and sudden fame pushed him over the edge. Others believed it went further back. That Carney, the sensitive son of a newspaperman from Mount Vernon, New York, was never meant for the spotlight. He was a perfectionist and an introvert. Fame never felt like a refuge to him. It felt like exposure. Even the cheers of a live audience, instead of providing comfort, reportedly left him feeling vulnerable. One of his biographers noted that Carney loathed confrontation. Even on set, if conflict arose, he would withdraw, offering polite smiles and small laughs rather than standing his ground. That's what made his performances as Ed Norton so believable. He channeled everything into the role. But the more popular Norton became, the more Art Carney seemed to vanish. Friends recalled how, at cast gatherings or rap parties, he would slip away early, so quietly that most people didn't notice he'd gone. During the run of the Honeymooners, he was married, but his personal life. As the years unfolded, Art Carney's personal life grew increasingly unstable. His marriage endured cycles of separation and reunion, ultimately ending in divorce more than once. At one particularly low point, Carney became so emotionally withdrawn that even his own children described him as a ghost drifting through their home. The burden of maintaining a cheerful public persona while battling deep inner turmoil took a toll, eroding many of his most important relationships. During this tumultuous period, Carney began cutting ties with former colleagues. While Jackie Gleason continued making efforts to reconnect and Audrey Meadows remained visible at industry functions, Carney vanished from the spotlight. He avoided red carpets, passed on reunion specials, and declined to participate in retrospectives, even those that promised substantial financial rewards. For him, that chapter of life was closed, and he had no desire to revisit it. When asked directly about his disassociation from the Honeymooners, Carney offered little clarity. "It was a wonderful time," he once said. "But just a time. I don't dwell on the past." However, buried within an old radio appearance, there was a quote that hinted at something far more personal. When asked if he had stayed in contact with his former co-stars, Carney responded, "Sometimes things end, and you don't realize the book has closed until you look back and see no one turn the page." The response was poetic and ambiguous, leaving fans and interviewers alike wondering, was it quiet regret, a nod to a falling out never publicly disclosed, or simply the words of a man who never truly felt connected to the world he helped shape? Regardless of its meaning, Carney's enduring silence left a noticeable gap in the Honeymooners' enduring legacy. That void only deepened when, shortly before her death, Audrey Meadows offered a final reflection on her former co-star that took many by surprise. In 1996, As she was in the late stages of her battle with lung cancer, Meadows granted a final interview to a trusted journalist friend. It wasn't intended for public release, only for historical record. By then, she had led a vibrant life beyond the Honeymooners, thriving as a banker and an advocate for women in business. Yet, when the conversation inevitably returned to her early TV years and Carney, her demeanor shifted. Despite her frail condition, she straightened up and said, "I always hoped we'd talk again, even once." There was no bitterness in her tone, just a wistful sadness. There was never a fight, really, but sometimes silence speaks louder than arguing. She paused, her voice growing softer. "I think Art carried guilt for something. I don't know what it was, but I think being near anything that reminded him of who he used to be, it hurt him." It was a curious and profound statement, and it clearly caught the interviewer off guard. When asked to elaborate, Audrey simply smiled and said, "People don't walk away from friendships without a reason. But not all reasons are ever spoken aloud." And with that, she moved on, offering no drama, no resentment, just a quiet acceptance that some things remain unresolved. Speculation soon followed. Some believed the relentless pace and pressure of the Honeymooners had slowly worn Carney down. Others suspected that perhaps some off-camera conflict had caused a lasting rift, though no such incident was ever made public. Whatever the truth, Carney never addressed it, and when he passed away in 2003, any answers he might have carried went with him. What lingers is a mystery that has haunted fans for decades. Why did Art Carney, who brought joy to millions as the beloved Ed Norton, walk away from the show and the people behind it with such finality? Was it rooted in emotional wounds, career frustrations, or something far deeper? We may never know. But what's certain is that the silence between Carney and Meadows became its own haunting tale. Not one of scandal or betrayal, but of two remarkable artists whose connection faded quietly, without explanation. For fans of the Honeymooners, the absence of closure between Carney and Meadows has left a lasting impression, lingering like a shadow behind the laughter. We remember him as the endearing sewer worker with a golden heart, swapping jokes with Gleason, while Meadows delivered eye rolls that stole scenes. Their chemistry was undeniable, their timing unmatched. Yet once the show ended, Carney didn't just exit the spotlight, he retreated from the people who made the magic with him. He never spoke ill of anyone. He didn't share grievances or criticisms. But he also never returned, never acknowledged the bond they once shared. And perhaps that's what stings most. His silence invites interpretation, opens space for doubt, and encourages speculation. Did he carry pain from something said or done? Was it guilt, discomfort, or a simple desire to move forward unencumbered by the past? Audrey Meadows never seemed angry, just saddened. In every interview, her tone suggested not bitterness, but sorrow. A kind of quiet grief over a lost connection that was never explained. In today's world, where oversharing is the norm, the restraint between Carney and Meadows feels even more poignant. Not all fallouts are loud. Some drift apart slowly, gently, and finally. When that happens between icons, between people who brought joy to millions, it resonates deeply. Because the audience too feels part of that story. They made us laugh, made us care, and then, without even realizing it, they left behind a final unscripted mystery. No dramatic farewell, no emotional reunion, just one lingering question hanging in the air. What truly happened when the cameras stopped rolling?